for what has been the success of JCAC in fighting poverty. We're still 50 years later, and we're still talking about the same issues.
But these problems are always going to be with us. We're always going to have poverty and problems with employment for some people. We need a long-term solution where we look at kids coming through as well as people currently in the problem of poverty right now.
Hello, and welcome to Erie Now, a current events discussion program where we hope to educate the viewers and also inspire community action about many of the factors that affect all of us right here in northwestern Pennsylvania. I'm Cindy Patton, and I will serve as your host for this program. Today we will address Erie's economy with a focus on poverty in our region. It seems that you can't pick up a newspaper these days without finding some headlines that detail some of the desertion of manufacturers that we used to have in Erie, or even the declining economy. Well, are these problems a result of a changing industrial environment, or perhaps it's a lack of education? Where is it needed most? What we do know is that these problems are certainly not unique to Erie. And while Erie County has an above-average poverty rate when we are compared nationally, we also live in an era of technological prosperity, previously unseen. Now, I would like to introduce, and I'd like to get you to know our panel of experts. We have Mary Beulah, who is the project facilitator for Erie Together. She is also Vice President of Collective Impact at United Way of Erie County. We also have Dr. Jim Curry, who is an Associate Professor of Economics at Penn State, the Barron College. Joining us also on this program, we have a couple of seasoned professionals. We have Lisa Adams, who is a reporter, producer, and anchor at WICU-TV. And we also have with us Jeff Pinsky, who is the former news editor of the Erie Morning News and recently retired Associate Director of Public Relations and Marketing at Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania. To start our discussion today, we're actually going to begin with a little video. We are going to hear from a community member who's actively fighting poverty. That person, Johnny Johnson.
When I look at the state of the economy in Erie, I have to look at it from a historical perspective. When I came here 43 years ago and look at it now, 43 years ago, you had your major manufacturers here. Kids could quit school in 9th and 10th grade, get a job, work till they got ready to retire, so on and so forth. And as society changed, especially with the moving of jobs from the U.S. to other countries, the ability of us to secure jobs here and to maintain a good standard of living kind of went down the drain, so to speak. When we go back to 1964, President Johnson declared a war on poverty, okay? And in a war, you have casualties. And he said at that point in time that 19% poverty level in America was just too much. Okay, we didn't win that war. You know, maybe we fought that war on the wrong front, you know, I don't know. But one of the things that has happened in that time is that we have seen a decrease in the level as an educator of education. And I don't mean education in the sense that people are not getting degrees, you know, and those things. I mean education as it goes down to the people who need it the most. The community that we once knew, we won't know anymore. Okay, the standard of living that we think is so great, we won't have. I'm not saying that we'll be a Detroit or we'll be a Flint or so on and so forth. I'm not saying that. But I am saying this. When people become engaged in what their community look like, what their community will be like, and they buy into making that community better, then we'll change. But if we want to maintain the status quo, us and them, east side, west side, rich and poor, then it's going to be chaos.
Well, as Mr. Johnson had said, you know, maybe we can become engaged, and that really sets the stage for this segment and sets the stage for our program. So we'll start off by asking a question, and we expect to have this kind of give and take here with our panel of experts. But what has worked to address poverty in Erie? And perhaps why has the poverty rates, as I understand, they've declined? We'll start with you, Dr. Curry.
I think the key thing that's happened in the last couple of years, we've seen the poverty rate fall in Erie County, which is good news. But primarily, I think that's due to the recovery from the recent recession. Poverty rates, we know, go up and down with the overall economy. So this recession, we've seen poverty rates spike all over the country. However, we need to take a longer-term look beyond those short-term numbers. And what we see there is that poverty rates in the U.S. and in Erie County have risen. If we go back to about 1999, poverty rates in Erie County were about 11%, and now they're in the 15 to 16% range. That's the bad news. It's a long-term problem, and we need long-term solutions to it, which we'll talk about today.
And I assume also that I understand children, the poverty rate among children is probably even more. How have we even come to the consensus of where the poverty rates are in Erie?
So I think the community over the last several years has really made fighting poverty a focus, and understanding what the impact and the magnitude of poverty is in this community has been top of mind. And that started back in 2006 when the Erie Community Foundation convened a poverty study group, and they did their work, released their findings in 2007, and that really began to mobilize the community around what can be done to address poverty. At that point, you had 3 organizations come together, GCAC, United Way of Erie County, and the Mercyhurst University Civic Institute, to form Erie Together, which is the region's anti-poverty initiative, which convenes hundreds of people across the community to help make this a place where everyone can learn, work, and thrive. Children, adults, and families. It's all about how do you help children be most successful, how do you help individuals get the jobs they need for family-sustaining employment, and how do you help families become more self-sufficient. So there's a real focus here now.
I know Dr. Curry said that the poverty rate has fallen somewhat in the last couple of years, but that's really just a couple of percentage points county-wide. And in the city of Erie, it really hasn't fallen. It's continued to stay steady or has gone up. So if Dr. Curry says, well, the economy has improved a little bit, maybe that's why the poverty rate has gone down. Are these initiatives making a difference? I mean, clearly you have identified the problem and everyone is rallying around the problem, but can you cite specific things that you're doing that are making a difference in that?
So Erie Together's work is really focused in 3 general areas, the whole learn, work, and thrive component. So we have learn areas, for instance, that are working with the youngest of ages, helping to make sure that kids are ready to enter kindergarten so that when they enter kindergarten, they can hit 3rd grade reading benchmarks. Erie Together's only been around for 5 years, right? So we're just getting baseline data to determine whether or not the kinds of things are making the kinds of impacts we expect them to, but let me tell you what it's doing. It's bringing people together like they never have before. Experts, citizens, people with all different kinds of personal and professional backgrounds to take a look at these issues and make long-term systemic changes. So it's going to take time for us to see our results, but we've got the right people engaged, and the community as a whole is really starting to make this a priority and do things within their own spheres of influence to make a difference.
Well, it seems that we've been talking about this, as Mr. Johnson said in the video, we've been talking about this for 50 years since President Johnson declared his war on poverty. And maybe, I think it was 1965, one of the few around here maybe old enough to remember that we founded one of the probably most successful anti-poverty programs in the country, and that's was JCAC, which is still in existence. Would we be worse off now if we didn't have JCAC? Or what has been the success of JCAC in fighting poverty? We're still 50 years later, and we're still talking about the same issues: education, employment, and poverty, especially in the city of Erie, as well as the region. So either one, Dr. Curry or Mary.
Well, a couple of comments. JCAC has done good work, there's no question about that, but these problems are always going to be with us. We're always going to have poverty and problems with employment for some people, and for others they'll do better. And so the issue is, I think as Mary mentioned, we need a long-term solution where we look at kids coming through as well as people currently in the problem of poverty right now, what we can do with them. But it's going to take a longer-term vision. A lot of the policies that we're talking about aren't going to change the numbers overnight, but over a longer period of time, we're going to see a more solid community where there's sustainability for folks who will be self-sufficient, and that's what we're looking for, I think.
What about the Vital Signs has I believe, 8 8 indicators, crucial indicators. And they all seem to have overarching concentric circles to them. And for me, it's hard to determine which comes first here. Was this education the most vital component when we talk about the economy, or is it jobs? How do you get jobs before there is education, or vice versa? And then how does that play in then with poverty? How do you attack poverty without attacking those two issues first?
It's a little bit like saying which blade of the pair of scissors is doing the cutting. All these things are tied together, I think. And so the long-term approach in my mind is the education issue, because in order to have income, you have to have skills that people are willing to pay you for. And that's where it starts. And so we've got to have our kids understand that it's up to them to develop skills that people are going to want to pay them for in the future, and to think about that as they're in school. But they're kids, it's hard to do. But with parents, they can help guide them, I think. Crucial factor that we see in determining poverty is the education level. We see, for example, in Erie County, that if you look at folks without a high school education, the poverty rate is about 32%. Almost 1/3 of those without a high school education are in poverty. That drops dramatically then if we look at people with a bachelor's degree. People with a bachelor's degree, last year, Erie County, 2.6% in poverty. The education clearly makes a difference. It's not a panacea, but it's where you start with this process, I think.
And if I could just add to that for a second, if you think about education, it's both about prevention and addressing poverty, right? So education at the earliest stages and through high school and beyond for children gives them the best chance possible. But education for people who are living in poverty, who can't find the jobs that are existing in our community because they don't have the skills, is a way to help them out of poverty. So it's about prevention and addressing it.
I think the early childhood education initiatives that you talked about are important, or making sure that kids are prepared for either preschool or kindergarten. But one thing that really concerns me is the breakdown of the family. Because even if you're starting a kid off in a preschool program or a pre-K program, if the home that they're going home to is not a good situation, or if they are transient. I've heard from educators in the Erie School District that some kids are living with an aunt one time, living with a grandmother another time. They're moving around and they're changing from school to school. And then these issues with the Erie School District financial situation. I mean, sometimes a school is a real symbol of hope in a neighborhood. And when these schools have to be shuttered and there's no real sense of a neighborhood school anymore, those are challenging factors. So I guess I'm talking about a few different things there. But I think the breakdown of the family is a huge factor. How does that play into your statistics?
We know that women-headed households have higher poverty rates, especially if women-headed households have children locally, because typically the woman of the house is taking care of the kids and providing child care. Employment is a key factor in poverty, and if you've got a household with a single parent, it becomes very difficult to do both full-time jobs of taking care of kids and providing income for the local area. And that's when we need to have social service agencies that can help over those times to help get through that, I think.
Do you think that the Erie School District, I mean, we're talking mostly Center City, and with the Erie School District, there have been a multitude of programs that have helped the kids, even from lunch programs or breakfast programs, I think have opened in even the last 10 years in order to be able to get the kids in school and to be able to get their hands on it. I mean, I happen to agree with Lisa and wonders that poverty breed poverty.
Yes.
So how do you break that cycle? And it all connects to itself.
So school districts are doing things differently than they ever had in the past to help engage the families more with the schools and doing things differently beyond traditional education. So last week at Erie Together's, or a few weeks ago at Erie Together's community forum, we heard about how school districts are doing things like backpack programs where they're sending food home with children in backpacks, or closets where people can bring in clothes so that families can access those clothes, or finding fun and engaging ways to engage families and bring them into the schools so that they are more comfortable with the school environment and they are more likely to engage in their child's education. That is always a challenge. Reaching those families and getting them engaged is very important.
Well, I too agree with Lisa. We had this conversation earlier this week. There's no question about that. Having the two-parent home and having the support in the home. The public education gets kids for maybe 5% of the time for the entire year. That's 95% of the time that's left to someone else to to have them and to push the education. But I think even more crucial to that, for the last maybe 200 years in Pennsylvania, or 150 years, whenever education came to be as being an agrarian state, students do not have to go to school until they're 8 years old. And that has been the law. So you can talk to Erie school district teachers who will tell you that they will get a child in first grade who can't identify a color, a number, or a letter. So what Mary says about early childhood education being so vital, how do you make sure that that happens, that we don't have these kids who are falling through the cracks and not coming to school until they're 8 years old?
You make a concerted effort to address those kinds of things. So you find ways to help children get enrolled in quality preschool programs. You find ways to reach the parents and help them understand what it means for their children to be kindergarten ready and how you can help them do that. You find ways to connect the parents and the early childhood educators with the kindergarten and the school district so that the transitions between pre-kindergarten and kindergarten are smooth and that they have the information they need to make sure these children are successful. And those are all the kinds of things that people in this community are doing through their work with Erie Together and the entire movement against poverty.
I think maybe it would be helpful to maybe further explain for anybody that may not understand what is Erie Together. And how is that helping some of these programs?
Okay, Erie Together was formed, as I said, through the three organizations, Mercyhurst University, GCAC, and United Way of Erie County. It's the region's anti-poverty initiative. It's attacking poverty through three different vantage points. And all of this work is to make this region a community where everyone can learn, work, and thrive, and those are the key words, right? So it's focusing on working directly with families, it's working directly in neighborhoods, and then it's working on countywide activities, actions, and plans through these countywide action teams that are bringing together people from all different walks of life to address this issue. Those 4 countywide action teams are focused on early childhood readiness and success, aligning education to careers, so focused on grades 4 through 12, and exposing children to their opportunities in life after high school so they can be most successful and prepare as well as they can for success after high school. It's working directly, helping individuals become self-sufficient, and then that 4th team is working on workforce and economic development, so making sure people have the skills that they need to get the jobs that we have here. It's a movement, and the way that this will be most successful is when we have more and more and more people engaged in making these kinds of things a priority for them.
I think you put your finger right on the key problem here, which is we've got problems with breakdown of the family, and how do we handle that? It's such a big issue. And as we've mentioned, though, early childhood education, I think, is a crucial component of this, both for short-term and long-term. We had a conference at Penn State Barron this summer. The Erie Institute brought in an economist to talk about early childhood and its effect on the economy. And we found some startling numbers there. The issue is that $1 spent on early childhood education, we're talking about kids who are 5 and 4 years old, pay back much more than you invest. $1 will pay back $1.80, $2.50. So 80% return or more on these numbers when you factor in later on just the income levels that those kids themselves have. But it has another impact too. If the program has a component of childcare to it, then it helps the parents get into the labor force. And so right now, it helps the folks who need the help now. So the early childhood helps the kid, which will pay off benefits a couple of decades down the road for the local area. But in the immediate term, it helps the parents get back into the labor force and start solving the problem right now. So the early childhood programs are amazingly important, much more than you would expect if you don't look at the numbers. And an interesting part of that is that doesn't have to be a government program. We have the Erie's Future Fund here locally, which is helping through private sector get the kids who most need the help into those early childhood programs. And another interesting component of that is, I have no children, and so I said, why should I have to pay for other people's to educate other people's kids?
That is a statement that's often made when taxes are increased because of school districts, and I don't have kids, why do I have to pay?
And the answer that Tim Bartik, the economist from Upjohn, talked about was that what happens is there are spillover benefits to those of us who don't have kids. If those kids are educated, it winds up raising the income levels of others in the local community. In fact, even more than the benefit to the individual kid. And so if we have situations where those children then get better skills, that means the labor force overall is better skilled, has higher skills, and that spills over to the other people that work with those folks. And so that pays off higher income levels, even to the others. And that's not something you would expect up front.
Well, let me just skip these for a moment. Dr. Curry, you're one of the more respected economists probably in the country. And you are a huge proponent of inland port and of the rail terminal. I've seen your writings on that. And even recently, there was an editorial in the newspaper saying the entire economy of Erie region hinges on this inland port and the rail terminal. So explain to us how this is going to help with the economy, and how do people get into that profession? Is this going to be if you build it, they will come, or do we already have guarantees that they will come when we build it?
Well, the folks at the Economic Development Corp have been putting together this game-changing plan for us about the Erie Inland Port. And the first part is the rail terminal in Harbor Creek. But it's going to tie into to ships that'll be taking things from here to Europe and bringing things from Europe here. They've discovered that it actually winds up being more efficient to get things into the central part of the country, to bring ships in through the Great Lakes down to Erie and then put it on rail in order to get these products in and also out. Than if you go through the ports of New York, where it's very, very crowded and it's much more expensive. Also, it's a quicker trip to get here, surprisingly, if we go that route. Those things are going to make it more possible for manufacturers to locate here and for our manufacturers here to do business with places around the world, especially in Europe. And as a result, we're expecting to see $500 to $800 million of new investment in the local economy, and that's huge. And that will also generate a lot of jobs. And those jobs then will benefit all folks in the local area. Even if current people don't get jobs specifically with the port or the rail terminal, the folks who do get jobs there are going to be spending money on Peachtree, and there's going to be spillover benefits to everybody else, I think.
Are these going to be skilled jobs, or are these going to be unskilled labor jobs? And how do folks get into that?
There's going to be a range of different occupations that will be involved here. We're talking mostly the logistics side, but then also manufacturer jobs. And so we're talking some level of skill, but there will be some unskilled jobs in here too. A lot of times we're talking about moving things from here to there, loading and unloading. But today that involves computers, that involves figuring out how we can read the RFID chips on things, and running the big equipment and the huge cranes that deal with this. So there will be a mix of those kind of jobs, I think, in both types.
Which I think is an important aspect of that. You want to be able to provide the minimum wage jobs and some skilled labor jobs. Then you get to the expert labor jobs, because I think that's important to the folks who obviously live in the town here, that they are able to apply where their skills may be.
Absolutely. We need a whole range of different occupations at the high-tech end, lower-tech end as well.
How do we guard, though, against putting all of our eggs in one basket, if you will? I mean, for years we heard, oh, if we only had the casino, that would be such a great thing. But that's been a challenging thing for them to maintain their revenues, which are, benefiting different organizations throughout the county now because of changes in laws in other states, other casinos opening up. And so it's hard to put all of the hopes and dreams onto one type of development.
You're right. And the good news is the Erie economy has been diversifying dramatically over the last 50 or 60 years. Back in the early 50s, about 1 job in 2 was in the manufacturing sector. And manufacturing is very subject to recessions. And so when we saw a recession nationally, the Erie economy got hit very, very hard. During the 50s, we lost a lot of jobs during recessions. But now we have a much more diversified economy. The Erie Inland Port is just going to be one part to increase that diversification. Most recently, we've been seeing the higher education sector grow dramatically in the local area, which has helped us a lot. We've seen the medical sector grow a lot. Manufacturing has declined in relative terms. And so bringing the Erie Inland Port in is going to bring us back to those roots of manufacturing and help that sector thrive and grow, along with the other things that are already going on. So I think it's going to help diversify the economy.
Just yesterday, I had the chance to sit in on this Ignite Erie event and hear the gentleman who started Jumpstart over in Cleveland, Ray Leach, I believe his name is, talk about the fact that almost all of the jobs that are created are coming from companies that have been started in the last 5 years, 5 years or younger. So are we doing enough here to fuel these entrepreneurial young people, our 20-somethings and 30-somethings, so that we don't have the brain drain?
No.
The easy answer.
We need to do more. We need to help our younger people see entrepreneurship as a viable career option instead of, I'm going to go work for someone else at the plant for the rest of my life, like my dad and grandpa did. Maybe I can have an idea and start a new company. A lot of the names that we know best in Erie deal with firms that started here in Erie, with Lord, AMSCO, Erie Insurance, companies like these. We need the next round of those coming through. Most employment growth comes from existing companies, and so the trick is to help our existing companies be competitive, but then also be planting those seeds for the next generation, so 20 years from now those companies will reach maturity and be providing new jobs.
Very interesting. I just also think that we were talking about poverty and we were talking about the jobs and the situation like that. Do we have enough organizations looking at these things? Do we have too many organizations? Oftentimes we'll hear about this group looking at this and this group looking at this. And I do think that all of Erie does know that poverty is a problem, does know that we need to do something about education. Do we have too many groups fractured? Should we all come together better?
That's exactly the purpose of Erie Together. That is bringing all of these groups together and talking about things in the same way to try to help make this a better place, right? So let's talk about the jobs piece for a second. One of the really exciting things that's about to launch is a program that will be called Career Street. And that will bring educators and employers and nonprofits together in ways they've never worked together before to expose kids to the careers that we have right here in this community. And so if you get the Inland Port project, or if you're looking at manufacturing opportunities here, or you're looking at Erie Insurance or Erie's Magnetics and all of these wonderful companies that we have in this community, they have jobs that are available, and these kids need to understand what these jobs are so they know what they need to do to prepare for them. And so Career Street will be a great way to connect employers with students, with educators and nonprofits, so they have quality career exploration experiences and can better prepare for those.
One thing I'll throw in here too is I think the Erie Community Foundation's Vital Signs program, which we're talking about, is crucial because it helps all of us get on the same page and see where we are, where the work needs to go.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time for this particular segment. I think we've had a great lively discussion that we have gone on here with our panel of experts, and we hope that if you have any other questions, you want to continue this particular discussion on poverty, we are going to give you a website now. It happens to be www.erievitalsigns.org. You can also like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at Erie Vital Signs, and you can use the hashtag Erie Now. So I'd like to thank our group of panelists here for participating in this discussion. I'd also like to thank you at home for tuning into this program. Obviously, Erie Now helps to educate our viewers and facilitate some additional discussion and inspire community action. So I'm Cindy Patton for Erie Now. I want to thank you and have a good night.